Hey guys, Keenan here. Just wanted to talk a little bit about my first experience playing with Mortal Kombat in a standard event. This past Saturday we had a 11-person local over at Challenges Comics and Games. We had a lot of old veteran UFS players come out, some of our newer guys, even a guy who was his first tournament ever, and he was playing a Runica deck, so I was really excited. The community seems to be pretty strong in Atlanta right now, and we're looking to grow, and so this was a great opportunity for us to kind of show our faces to the folks over at Challenges, which is a great store that we're very lucky to be hosted at. For the event, I played Scorpion, and we only played Swiss rounds, but I ended up going 4-0. So at the top seed, we didn't bother doing top cuts or anything like that. We just called it there. But I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about my experience because Standard is very new. There's a lot of new strategies, new decks, tons of new characters, new cards. So what I found going into this tournament was that essentially I was pretty much going blind, and I built this deck probably 2 nights before the event. I maybe played one match, maybe a game with Ashley. No, it was a full match. And then we just said, all right, let's see what happens. So without further ado, I just kind of want to give you the profile. So first things first, Scorpion is my character. Starter deck character, so anybody who's looking to get him, he's really easy to get. And when you buy these starter decks, you get an ultra rare alongside your starter. I didn't get anything good, but maybe you'll pull a fatality. So he is a 628, which is already very solid stat line, like the perfect 6-hand size dream stat line. Any more vitality in your abilities are probably worthless. So for 28, you're really getting some effective bang for your buck. But this guy's got Death, Evil, and Fire. Fire being the symbol that I've had the most success with recently, Evil being my favorite symbol ever, Death being one of my least favorite symbols right now. I don't know why, but I chose to play him off of Evil today, and his abilities are E, lose 2 life. If your opponent blocks this attack, they lose 2 life. So basically, he creates some really tricky scenarios where you're not really sure you want to block, and I really liked how Sub and Scorp both had this punish you for blocking mentality, because a lot of times the thing that 6-handers struggle with is getting value for their cards because they are sitting at a lower hand size, and 7-hand size characters have a much easier time blocking their attacks. So this guy really gets to just shove it in their face and say, all right, well, regardless, if you're going to block my attack, you're still going to burn. And if you partial block my attack, which happened many times over the course of the event, like it's almost as though you just took the damage to the face. So that ability is very good. The next ability is probably his best general ability. Lose 1 life. This attack gets -2 or +2 speed. The +2 speed is incredibly important if you're going to play a very aggressive build, and my build is very aggressive. I think I'm playing around 22 to 23 attacks. And the minus speed on that ability is basically just having like active girl like any other just printed on your character all the time for losing a life. So being able to just drop a net -2, like a perfect net -2, is super strong. So this guy's actually got a ton of defense built into him by himself. The last ability is the kicker. He's the reason you play. That's the reason you play Scorpion. It's Desperation E. Your Desperation attack gets +6 damage. So you get into Desperation, and suddenly all of your attacks are 10 damage, 9, 10 damage, +2 extra speed. So you're just throwing the entire kitchen sink at them, and there's really not a whole lot that can stand up to that. So I really like the character design. I think it's very good. It reminds me a little bit of Mature, but even more punishing if you go into Desperation. And he can lose life so quickly that it doesn't even matter if he's at 20 life. He's in Desperation on 1 attack, almost guaranteed. So in terms of the attacks, I played quite a few, just because 6-hand size aggro is not something I'm used to playing, and so I figured I might as well draw the attacks that I want to see. And so we're going to start with 4 of my favorite card ever. Coffee Samba. It's Desperation too, which is ridiculous, but not to mention it does everything else. So draw 2 cards, your opponent draws 2 cards, which, giving your opponent a hand advantage is never great. But then the other ability says this attack gets multiple X and stun X, where X is the number of cards in your opponent's hand. So they probably kept 2 cards to block with because they don't want to die. And now they've got 4 cards in their hand, and you've got a stun 4 attack that's got +2 speed off of Scorpion, maybe +6 damage. So, we're looking at a potential 6 mid for 11, stun for multiple question mark. So card's really good still. The 1 check, I definitely played around this card with my foundations with the one check, so it's definitely a risk, but as long as you calculate for the risk, you tend to be pretty okay. And the biggest thing about this deck is because all the attacks ended up being such low difficulty, it was kind of like I got to play the same sort of curve of a Mad Puro, where I'm playing a bunch of cards like that are basically 2 difficulty afterwards to actually end up killing my opponent. So the next card I played was another 5 diff by the name of Glaive Throw. This is my only non-desperation attack in the entire deck. However, it does have a desperation ability, which I found to be very strong as a leadoff. Desperation E, name a card type your opponent reveals their hand and loses 2 life for each card of the name type revealed this way. So you say, alright, you built last turn. Well, I'm going to play this card and I'm going to name attack or action. And suddenly your opponent reveals their hand and you can see all of their blocks, you can see all of their special defensive hand traps, and they lose life. And then the enhances lose 2 life. This attack gets +2 speed and +2 damage. And pro tip, if your opponent is, if you're a desperation and your opponent is getting a 7 damage attack thrown at them from Scorpion, they're taking that. Because I can't pump this with damage for Scorpion, so it's only 7. But it's pretty much unblockable because they know better than to take 7 so that they can eat 10 in a second. So the next card that we've got here is my favorite card out of the set, I think? Flame Aura. This card is nuts. It's a +1 high block, it's 5 speed mid, 4 damage, 5/3, but those stats kind of don't matter because really it's just the best block ever printed. It says, when attempting to block with this card, reduce the speed of your opponent's attack to 0. Now, if 0 speed and my face mean anything to you, this speaks very closely to my heart, especially because it has the evil symbol. But then it says, while this card is in your card pool, your opponent loses 1 life after a block is successfully played. So you block with this, and from my understanding, they burn for 1 because it's in your card pool and it's played. Not 100% on that, but then for every other block you play for the rest of the turn, they burn for 1. And so if you get 2 of these in your card pool, they burn for 2. 3, burn for 3. Also, when you lead off with it, if they play any blocks against your stuff, they're burning for 3 every time they play a block, so that feels really bad for them. But that blocking ability was really one of the main reasons that this deck worked. Because it could sit back and say, alright, well, I don't have the gas to kill you, but I'm totally fine building a couple because I'm not even going to have to try to block your strongest high attack you're going to play this turn. So next up, I put in 3 copies of Minion Grab. This attack is very good. It is a throw, so Scorpion makes it 9 damage base, and then it's a throw, which is sick. It has no block on it, which is why I only played 3. I like to be able to block with the cards that I keep in my hand, and if I have to keep this, actually I never keep this, I throw it out immediately, and I'm just like, alright, here, if you've got a reversal me, but I don't want to hold on to an unblock. And then it says, lose 1 life. If this attack is not blocked, your next attack gets +2 damage and -2 to its desperation rating. And then lose 2 life. If this attack is blocked, your opponent loses 2 life as well. So you kind of give them in a catch-22 where it's a throw. So if they block it, they're taking a net -1 damage going without you being in desperation. And then once you're in desperation, it's 9 damage, and then they block it, and they burn for 4 if you use this and Scorpion's ability, so it's like it's unblockable anyways. So that's super sick, and then so they choose not to block it, and then your next attack gets -2 to its desperation rating, so it's practically free, and it gets +2 damage. So it's really just a win-win for Scorpion when he's slinging those out. Next up, I played 4 of Syndicate Slice. This is also one of the Bebop common stars that you'll see a lot of in Vicious decks, but this guy is a 4 diff, +1 mid block. The block is very nice, 3 high 4 damage, so solid stat line for a 4/3, and then Desperation 2. And it is E, your next check to play an attack gets +1. So if you're creating this giant string, it just lets you keep on going, and you can lead off with this early and not feel bad, because if you check a Coffee Samba, you can still commit enough cards to pass it, and maybe another attack afterwards. And then if it's blocked, you draw a card. So like, this card is super good at de-incentivizing your opponent to block. No one wants to block this, especially when it's coming before Desperation. Once it's 10 damage, though, that's when things get exciting, because then you lose 2 for Scorpion. It's like, alright, you're going to block this because it's 10, so you're going to burn for 2, and I'm going to draw a card, and if you partial block it, you're actually losing 7, which happens several times at the tournament. So this guy, super good, especially in like a high attack aggro deck, because just getting that extra +1 bonus to your later checks for your attacks is super key. Next up, I played 4 of Takedown. This card wasn't as good as I thought it was going to be, and mainly that's because, sorry, dropped one, people block still. It's 2 speed, and it's a low. But there were a couple times that I got it to go off. I played against Ryan Reed playing Goro, and you know, when you have 4 hand size and you play out all of your cards, suddenly I am using Drew Maffei Lion Buddy 2.0 to dig for my next Coffee Samba, which definitely happened. Yeah, the best part about this card definitely for me was the block. +1 low, so I had a +0 high block off of Glaive Throw, a 0 speed screw your attack high block off of Flame Aura, a mid block +1 off of Syndicate, and +1 low. So basically, if I could draw into a hand of attacks that wasn't quite what I needed, I could sit back on my hand of attacks and just say, okay, kill me. And then they'd get me to Desperation, and then I'd just block everything and backswing. The next card is one of my favorite cards out of the set, Flameport. It's kind of a Sturmwaff reimagined. It's not quite as good as Sturmwaff because playing multiple copies of them doesn't create massive stat lines that your opponent can't deal with, but what it does have is this nifty lose 1 life if this attack is blocked, add it to your momentum after it resolves. So it kind of is unblockable in this format. You never want to give your opponent fast momentum unless you've got a way to deal with it, Spaceland or something along those lines. And people are typically playing Spaceland mostly in sideboard, so this guy is just a 4 mid 4 that I never even burn for the Scorpion ability unless I'm trying to get to Desperation for burn if you block, burn for 2. So really it's just free 4 damage, and you can throw it out as early as turn 1 if you're ballsy. I throw it on a turn 2 because I respect my 1-checks. But yeah, Flameport is going to be seen in a lot of aggro decks coming up, so definitely take a look at this one because it's very good. The last I played was a 1x Get Over Here. This card is okay. I wish it was better because it's, you know, Scorpion's main catchphrase. But what it does do is set up a really, really strong second to last attack. So change the zone to this attack to high, which I mean, why not? If they've got a high block, they've got a high block. Though I mean, a lot of your attacks are mid, so you might be fine just leaving it as mid so that they block this and take the next one. And then lose 2 life. The next attack you attempt to play gains Desperation 0. So, you know, when you've actually got 5 attacks in your card pool, or 4 or 5, which I got to a couple times, I mean, being able to just say, alright, I need, how many cards in my card pool? Okay, that much. And passing it and then murdering your opponent with it feels really good. It lets you set up some really aggressive lines really early, and then late game, especially if you get some Coffee Samba draws into multiple copies of attacks, it lets you set out an 8-card card pool, and you may only need 1 or 2 turns of build, which is basically Scorpion's late game because he's super aggressive. So he's very good. Alright, next up for my favorite card ever, it's Revoke. I play 1-checks, so I like having 0 difficulty foundations, and they are also action cards that negate my opponent's enhances. Very good card. I, many times, enhance with Coffee Samba, draw 2 cards, rip a Revoke, and cancel your Swordfish that was your next enhance. That happened during the tournament, I think, twice, so that felt really good. Card's just always going to be good. Play it, have it, just, this never rotate, never change, Revoke. Alright, next up, Undying Rage. This is Scorpion's 3/6 unique, +1 mid-block. I only played 1 of it. Is very good. E-commit. If the top card of your discard pile has Desperation or Fury, add it to your hand. Every single one of my attacks has Desperation except for Glaive Throw. So, pretty much, if I've got a card on top of my discard pile that's an attack, I can just add it to my hand. Other abilities, Scorpion E, discard a momentum, gain 2 life, playable while committed. If you end up throwing a bunch of attacks at your opponent that don't kill them, and you just stack momentum and put it in a pile, you can gain 6 life over the course of an attack string, and not die, which feels good. Next up, 4 of one of my new favorite foundations. This is Outworld's Eris, and it got errated, so the second ability used to be lose X Vitality. After a attack is played, it gets -X to its Sun rating as a response. This was problematic because you could just put yourself into Desperation by playing an attack and then just blowing it up and saying, I'll lose 15, I'm in Desperation, okay, cool, let's go ham. But the other ability is actually really good on it. It's basically Ever Hopeful, but a little bit on steroids, because it's E, remove, lose X life, add 1 asset or foundation from your opponent's staging area to their hand, X equals that card's difficulty. So you're sitting at 20 life, and you're not in Desperation yet, but damn, you sure want to be. And you play out your lead-off attack, Flame Aura, Coffee Samba, Glaive Throw, whatever. And you just go, alright, well, I'll burn myself for 3 for Scorpion, because those 2 enhances, and then I'll use Outworld Zerus, and suddenly I'm at 14, 13. And yeah, you just go in from that point. This gets rid of Swordfish too. This gets rid of just about everything. Did they go in last turn and only have 1 ready foundation? Well, now you don't have to deal with that. That feels good. Next up, I played a 1x Face of a Monster. I think I could play more of this card. I like this card a lot. Each ability on this card is only playable once per turn, and basically it's got a response that gives speed reduction, a deadlock form, which will never happen unless your opponent is, super defensive, or Desperation. You change the zone of this attack to any other zone. So you can get into Desperation, change attack to high, block with Flame War without even blinking, and then go about your merry way. Also has a +2 high block on it, so just very, very good card all around. I played a 1 of Unbridled Arrogance. It says your Fury or weapon attack gets -4 speed and +4 damage. A lot of Scorpion's attacks are Fury, and then everything else in my deck was weapon. So if my opponent ran out of cards, it could just say, okay, this is going to make this a mountain, +10 damage if you include Scorpion. But the main card that was in there for was definitely Minion Grab, because it's a throw. So you're just like, I don't care about the speed. You're taking damage either way, so here's a -1 low for 13. So that was good. Next card I was actually really underwhelmed by, and that's because I don't need more damage. Toasty says, flip, your attack gets +6 damage, excesses printed Desperation rating is playable while committed, so it's kind of good for aggressive decks, but I really never... This card never really made enough of a difference to warrant playing. I would probably swap it out for either more copies of Face of a Monster, possibly some copies of the Vicious 2/5 +3 high that says lose life to make your opponent discard momentum, because you don't care about taking damage in this character, so going up against a Skull Barrier deck, that could be really helpful. Next up, we're going down to the 1-diffs, because we play a lot of 1-diffs because we're a Coffee Samba deck. First thing is Power Split. If you get a ton of momentum early, Flame Port's dealing damage and other things, it just gives you an option to play a little bit better defense and screw with your opponent's offense at the same time, which is really strong. Also has a very, very good combo with Undying Rage, because you discard a attack from your momentum, and then you pick it up with Undying Rage. And the best attack to do that with is Coffee Samba, because on turn 2, if you have 3 foundations in a character, you play Coffee Samba, you stun them out, you hit them for 5, because it's 6 speed, they're not blocking this, and then you, on the next turn, like when they're swinging in, you Power Split, discard your momentum, commit one of your foundations, turn 2 guy, and then you just pick your Coffee Samba right back up with Undying Rage, and it's sick. It's super sick. Like, 1 turn of Coffee Samba is brutal enough. 2 turns of Coffee Samba you don't come back from. So that card's good. Arranging a Deal. Played a 2 of it. 1/6 +2 mid block. Solid stat line. Desperation E flip draw card. Basically just does everything that I want to do with 1 card. So that's cool. Next up, 4x Empress of Netherrealm. This card is amazing. Flip, lose 3 Vitality draw card, which, would be bad or worse than Arranging a Deal if I wasn't playing a character that was trying to get to Desperation as fast as possible. And the second you get 2 of these down on turn 2, you can pretty much just, I'll go to Desperation and win, because why would you waste time like that? Next up, we've got 3 copies of Know Your Objective. Desperation Enhance. It was this or Explosive Acrobatics, but I didn't want to try to play a high stat line for Tech Spheres, which is typically the reason I play Explosive Acrobatics in decks anyways, and the Desperation Enhance actually comes out really clutch in certain situations. Flip over Survivalist, flip over any damage reduction. It's just very good, and then -2 speed, naturally, solid 1/5. Next up, 2 of Reformed Scientist, just in case people are playing a lot of Breaker. I know we got Brutality in this set, we got a couple other Breaker cards. Breaker is always going to be very strong against aggro, so having a way to combat it is really strong, and the only time this actually saw an activation was versus Ashley when she played Dagger Strike on turn 1 and gave her an extra attack -2 difficulty, and I said no, and then she looked at me and all sad, and it was adorable. Next up, 1 of Harrison's Lucky Day. I needed another 0-diff, and I hate Spiders and Dragons, so this card actually filled 2 roles for me. I didn't feel like playing a bunch of copies of it, because I don't have that many important foundations, and especially if I'm trying to get a good turn 1 build down, I'm going to go 1-diff, 0-diff, 1-diff, maybe a 2 diff, and if I'm lucky I get my 2, and if I'm not lucky then they don't have any targets with spiders and dragons that are worth anything. So it's okay. Next card, very impressed by, maybe running 4 of this in the future. Only ran 3, Most Trusted Assassin. 0-5. First death, your opponent reveals 1 random card from their hand. I played against Dennis Lay playing Katana, and I definitely saw several princess parties in his hand over the course of several turns, and it sort of gave me a good idea of how to approach the matchup and got some good hand knowledge. But the really, really good ability on it is the once per turn lose 1 life. Your opponent's next check to play an attack, it's -1. They have to respect that, because if they fail their check, their turn ends. So it's really, really good if your opponent's like starting to swing in on you really hard, and you're like, I didn't get the best blocks, but I certainly have a way to screw your turn up, and then they check bad, and then their life is over. Next up, 4 of Fallen Angels, just the best 0 diff playing 1 checks card ever printed. Good block, +2 low, and then you get to see the top card of your deck, and like if you think your opponent's going to keep attacking you, you can keep the 5, and if you think your opponent's going to stop attacking you, then you just discard it, and you're like, alright, maybe I'm going to get a Coffee Samba next. Or you just keep the Coffee Samba like a man and take all the rest of the damage. It works either way. So yeah, that's the whole deck. I did play a sideboard. The only relevant cards in it were 3 of Demanding Submission. The rest of it was put in the Abyss, and that was dumb, and a bunch of other stuff that was dumb. But Demanding Sub definitely helped me. I played against Ryan Reed first, playing Goro, 40 card or 40 life, 4 hand size, 90 card deck. This man had. He was trying to get as much damage on the throw that Goro has. It gets +1 damage for each one of your 5 diffs. So the attack line was pretty much statted at 5 diff, and all he would do was try to get a good build turn 1, and then just start swinging and milling and swinging and milling to the point where he would just pick up 4 copies of his throw and then murder you into the ground. It was a little bit slow. I got a little bit lucky in terms of getting into Desperation, and I killed him on turn 3, at least in 1 game, maybe turn 4 the next one. But 40 life is always going to be a scary stat line. That's a mountain to climb, and Scorpion climbs it really easily, which is scary. That Desperation +6 damage on everything was just a godsend. So I thought going into after seeing some of the characters and seeing what they can do, that Goro is going to be this giant threat, and I think he's still going to be really, really good against mid-range and slow decks. Like, against really slow decks, he can just kind of keep them out of the game unless they run a bunch of fatalities, just because he sets his mid-range up, and then his kill turn is unstoppable. But he does have a harder time if you can pump out 40 damage on turn 3, which Scorpion does very well. So second game I played against Dennis. He was playing Katana, and that is one of the coolest characters that Jasco Game has printed. They've had some rough spots trying to design control characters that weren't getting banned, and I think they finally hit their sweet spot. Being able to discard my attacks was really annoying. The problem is I got counterplay because I get to play Revoke, so I definitely went Coffee Samba, draw 2, Revoke your Katana Enhance one time, and he burned for 5, and I killed him. So that was fun, but we did have some really good back and forth. We went to a game 3 that time, and Princess Perry, really good card. Love that card to death. It's gonna be very strong. And Katana, really, really cool character. So I'm very interested to see how he evolves his deck and how she evolves as a character going forward into the season. Next I played against Ash. She was playing Spike 2 because she didn't have a whole lot of time to build anything before the tournament, so sort of just slapped her old Spike 2 deck together and went in. This was the only deck that I actually got to test against before the tournament, and during her testing, she never drew 1 Swordfish Plasma Cannon, and this was exactly the same. She just didn't see them, and I got to punish really hard for it and just sort of throw a bunch of attacks and win. So sorry to hear, but I love you. And last game, the finals, I guess, was against Tommy. Actually, at that point, Ash was 3-0. She was the best record that I faced, so you know that was the real finals. And then versus Tommy, who was 1-1-1 with Raiden. Yeah, he was playing this really, really cool deck. He loves the card Ancient Knowledge. I think that's what it is. It's the Malian 2/5. You flip it over, and your opponent takes a foundation and puts it in their staging area. Only playable if they've got less foundations than you. So basically, with Raiden, because he gets to blow up all of his foundations and he has to stay under 6, he's like, all right, go ahead, build out, because I'm going to Ancient Knowledge you, you're going to get rid of one of your foundations, then I'm going to blow up a foundation to have less foundations than you, and then enhance on my Spike Kick to unflip my Ancient Knowledge, or the Oil Man card, to unflip my Ancient Knowledge and Ancient Knowledge you again, and just keep you really foundational while I slowly ping you off with a bunch of attacks and then kill you with multiples, I think. So that deck is cool. It has a bit of a problem with decks that don't build a lot of foundations, which mine was. So it was very fortunate. I think I got a lot of really good matchups there. The only one that was sort of iffy was Katana, but for the most part, I think this whole tournament series has really shown me, like, Scorpion is a bit of a powerhouse, it feels like, just off the rip, and there is a lot to that character. And I feel like people can build him a lot of different ways off of each of his symbols. There's definitely an argument for a how do you like them apples deck, where you just play an even more aggressive build, where you just add 4 of that action card in there and you start swinging and you start drawing cards. There's more play for a just like fire good things deck. I'm sure somebody's going to just put Punch and Judy in it and see what happens. But yeah, so I think this character is really strong. Not sure how tournament defining he is. We're going to see how well these fatality decks can sort of wall up. He's very lucky that he's not really weak to fatality, so that feels good. But at the same time, like, anything can happen, and I feel like a good 7-hander that's got some good draw options, maybe Yin and Yangs, maybe see some Templar coming back. Maybe that will give him a run for his money, because this was a very like solid, very easy path to victory for me this time. But I think as the game and the metagame develops, Scorpion's going to have a harder time winning. But certainly early in the season, as people are sort of learning the cards, he's going to steal some wins off of a lot of good players, just because he accidentally drew the nuts. And Coffee Samba is always going to be the nuts. So thank you guys so much for listening to this. I know it was very long-winded, and I talked a lot about what the abilities on the cards do, so you're probably not interested if you're a pretty standard regular player, but just giving you some insight into what I think the meta is going to be like, and I'm looking forward to more of it. Alright, see you later, guys.